Today, we're joined by the EU ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Vale Almeida, who is visiting us here at the Miami Herald. Ambassador, welcome to the Miami Herald, and indeed, welcome to Miami. I understand it's your first trip to South Florida. First of all, let me ask you, how's it going? How are you finding South Florida?
A bit rainy, but otherwise it's a great state. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I apologize about the weather, but this means that you have to come back.
I'm sure I do want to come back, and be sure that I'll be calling on you again.
But let me ask you more seriously about the EU and the EU's relationship with the US. There was a lot of expectation after President Obama came into office that there will be a new relationship, a reset, if you will, of the relationship between the EU and the United States. How has that worked out? What has been the expectation of the EU, and has the Obama administration met those expectations?
I think the relationship is in pretty good shape. It is in fact a unique relationship in the world. I mean, we represent more than 50% of the world's wealth, more than 40% of the world's trade happens across the Atlantic, and we basically share the same values, to a point that I think we are each other's best friends. And this is extremely important. And it's certainly more important than any incident that can happen here and there in one or the other files. So pretty good shape, but still a great potential that we can use, that we can tap. And one of my purposes here is try to contribute for this relationship to go even further than it is today.
But you're talking about best friends. Now, best friends, some may argue, have had some disagreements between the U.S. and the EU. I mean, there was a lot of media last year when there were some questions about whether President Obama was committed to the EU process and would attend the EU summit. Have we gotten past that dust-up, in your view?
Definitely. We went well beyond that. The summit took place a few months after it was foreseen, so no big drama about that. And we are now working together on all sorts of issues. I give you a few examples. We are now discussing, as we speak, and beginning of next week in Washington, about the Middle East peace process. And the US and the EU are major partners of the international efforts to revive the peace process. Extremely important. Second issue, Arab Spring. Everything that's happening now in Northern Africa, in the Arab world, which is extremely important, because for the first time these countries are coming back to democracy, aspiring to become fully democratic countries. We need to support them. It's part of our strategic interest, but it's also a duty towards the young people of these countries that want to enjoy the freedoms that we already enjoy. And there, US and EU are working extremely closely together to try to create the conditions for a sustainable path towards not only democracy but also economic development. Two examples of where we today cooperate extremely well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Arab Spring. It's an area where you see a region that's in many cases convulsing with democracy. On this, has the EU been able to speak with one voice on that? I know an EU of a grouping of many constituencies and many voices, but on this, has the EU been able to speak
as we know, we are 27 countries, covering a wide continent in Europe, 500 million people. We have different opinions here and there about many issues, and that's only normal. That's democracy. On this particular issue, we are all together saying that we need to support the aspirations of the Arab people, the people in Northern Africa. Clear commitment from Europe to support the democratic process. And supporting the democratic process means not only helping them establish solid and deep democracies, not only electing a government here and there, but creating the solid foundations for democratic societies, but also helping them develop. Youth people in the Arab world, they want jobs. They want freedom, they want jobs. We need to help them, elevate their levels of consumption, their quality of life, the quality of the infrastructures of these countries. And I think there, all Europeans are together in saying this is our responsibility. It is also our interest, because this region is in our backyard. So we need to ensure stability for the sake of our own security. So you will find a common voice, a common message from Europe on that. And then each country can contribute in a different way. If you take the situation in Libya, we have some of our member states contributing in a way that others don't. But that's part of the differences that exist inside the Union, the diversity that exists inside the Union, which for us is a good thing.
Which brings up an interesting question, though. In Libya, even though there were divergent views as a whole, the EU was moving toward sharing the belief, as the US did, that we need to get in there and get Colonel Gaddafi, at least to support the folks on the side of democracy. What about Syria? We're not seeing the same type of aggressive action in Syria that we have in Egypt or in Libya. What do you think should be done there?
Well, each country is a different case. You cannot compare Libya to Egypt, to Tunisia to Syria, or Yemen to Bahrain. So we have to consider each country on its own merits, and the situations are very different if you compare them. Now, with Syria, we've been very clear about what we expect from the Syrian authorities. And when they do not correspond to our expectations, which has been unfortunately the case, we have been very clear in applying sanctions against the regime, against the highest authorities in the regime. So our position has been pretty homogeneous, pretty consistent in contradicting what is being done by the Damascus government. So we keep the same line, but we have to adapt to the situation, particular situation in each of these countries. In doing so, again, like in Libya, hand in hand with the United States, we have been basically taking the same positions which imply a very strong pressure upon President Assad.
First question on Greece. How supportive has the U.S. been in working with the EU to try to help solve the debt situation there?
As you know, we are reacting to an extremely difficult situation in one of our member states, which represents the effects of the financial crisis, as we know it since 2007, 2008, linked to some structural problems that the Greek economy has accumulated over the years. The Union has been very clear in its solidarity towards Greece. We won't let Greece down. In this solidarity, we were very happy to see the support of the United States, largely through the International Monetary Fund, which has been a partner of ours in dealing with the Greek problem. So I can say that full commitment from the United States, full solidarity in trying to create the conditions to solve the Greek problem. And let me tell you very clearly, we are in the process of solving the Greek problem. It will take some time. It will take very important efforts from the Greek population, but we will prevail in safeguarding the solidity of the euro area, in creating conditions for the Greek economy to come out of this crisis stronger and fitter, more competitive in the world markets.
Have you had to reassure Americans looking again at these images that what you're seeing is not all of Europe, it's just one country that's having some problems at the moment, and not all of Europe is in the midst of this kind of chaos and turmoil?
That is clear. I mean, if you consider that we have 27 countries, 500 million inhabitants, and in Greece we're talking about one country, roughly 12 million inhabitants, that gives you an idea. But if I tell you more about the three countries that are under this rescue package, Greece, Ireland and Portugal, the three of them represent 6% of Europe's GDP. So this gives you an idea of the relative weight of this problem. But of course, I'm not underestimating that the difficulties we have. We need to solve them. We are fully committed to solve them. But we need to keep things in perspective.
Well, finally, Mr. Ambassador, I know you've been here almost a year, and as a former journalist, you know a little bit about writing the first paragraph of a story, which we call a lead. Now, if you would describe or if you were to write a report back to Brussels about your first year, what would that lead be?
I think the lead will be about change. The change that is happening in this country after the election of President Obama, but also the process of changing of an industrialized society that suddenly is facing strong competition from emerging economies, that has to deal with some structural problems, the debt, the deficit, the aging of the population, the demographic imbalances, but also the intercultural challenges that one has in these countries as much as one has in Europe. So a few elements of change which makes it so fascinating to be here and observe you and this great society.
Well, thank you again for visiting us here in Miami Herald, at the Miami Herald, and we hope that you come again and we'll see what we can do about the weather.
Thank you. I count on you. Thank you very much.